They called me into the conference room like it was a normal meeting. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Bradley, the new boss's son, draped himself over the chair at the head of the table and smiled like he owned the place. I had been at Hargrove Tech for 9 years. I built the inventory tool that kept shipments aligned. I trained half the team. I was calm, and then Bradley stood and announced, "We're making changes. We need fresh faces." He pointed at a kid in sneakers, Mason, who looked pleased. Jordan, my manager, slid a manila envelope across the table. "Here are your transition papers," he said, avoiding my eyes. The word transition was polite until it wasn't. My hands went cold. My chest tightened, so hard I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I clutched the edge of the table and read the letter anyway. Role eliminated. Severance offered. Bradley laughed as if this was a joke. "We want modern energy," he said. I swallowed. I had spent nights debugging and rewriting code to keep the system alive. He had no idea. Mason winked. The whole room hummed with awkward smiles. No one stood for me. The door shut behind me like the last click of a lock. I felt small and furious at once. I left the building and sat on a low curb until my hands stopped shaking. People walked by with lunch bags and earbuds, unaware of the moment that shifted my life. My phone lit up, texts from team members asking if I was okay. Sasha texted, "We're so angry." I could hear the injustice like a drum beating in my chest. I had not seen it coming, not really. 2 weeks earlier I'd stayed late to push the final optimization for a client demo. I remember the code compiling cleanly at 2 a.m., coffee cooling beside my keyboard. I had thought Jordan would be proud. Instead, they'd use my work as an excuse to replace experience with someone Brad liked. I thought about how many times I'd let small slights slide because I love the work. I let my pride be quiet. But that night on the curb, quiet felt like a trap. I opened my laptop right there, boots on the pavement, and copied the commit logs I had on my home machine. I screenshot timestamps. I zipped files to my personal drive. I was not going to walk away empty-handed. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because my work was mine. The injustice burned and galvanized me in the same instant. The next morning I told myself to be calm and smart. Anger could wreck things. I went home and sifted through old emails, digging for anything that proved the work was mine. I had notes from late-night conversations with clients and push logs that showed times from my IP. The contract clause about company IP nagged at me. All work produced on company equipment is company property. But most of my breakthroughs came at home on my laptop, sometimes at 11 p.m., sometimes at 3 a.m. I had timestamps and private repo backups. I also had a hidden line of code I'd woven into the system, a subtle comment with my initials and a date. It was invisible to anyone who didn't open the specific file I'd authored. No one had ever checked that file. I packed evidence into folders and sent samples to a small startup I'd once consulted for, Lurex. The founder there, Devin, had messaged me years ago saying, "If you ever need support, say so." I swallowed my pride and hit send. This felt like betrayal, and survival rolled into one. I wasn't greedy. I wanted credit and the chance to keep building, not to be tossed aside like old paper. Word spread fast at Hargrove. I kept getting messages. They said, "You're gone. Did you see Mason's post? We're meeting without you." It stung because those were people I'd mentored. Sasha came by my apartment with a bag of takeout and anger in her eyes. "They don't know what they've done," she said. She told me Mason had already started to poke around the codebase, hoping to make changes. I pictured him deleting important modules like someone erasing a chalkboard without a plan. I did not want the system I built to fall apart. I also did not want the humiliation to be the last word. So I set meetings with a lawyer and Devin at Lurex. The lawyer asked direct questions about IP creation, timelines, devices used. I answered. Devin sounded calm and interested. "Bring whatever you can prove was done on your machine," he said. It felt surreal to plan this like a battle. Yet, I realized something else. I had built more than a tool. I had built trust with clients who now relied on that system. If Hargrove threw that away, those clients would suffer. That made the stakes more than personal. It became about responsibility. Back at Hargrove, Mason clicked keys too fast and deleted a folder during a cleanup. They told everyone it was an accident, the kind of HR-friendly phrase that slides over panic. But I knew the code. Imagine the missing pieces. A client dashboard started throwing errors. The tracking system lagged. Vendors called in the afternoon, worried. Hargrove scrambled. Jordan sent a terse message, blaming a backup problem. Bradley paced the floor, finishing sentences no one needed. The board demanded answers. Clients asked for explanations. And somewhere in the middle of that mess, I got a call from the East Coast Alliance, the client who relied on my routing module. The voice asked, "Can you consult?" My chest did a strange leap. The company that had just fired me wanted my help. I lied low, careful with words. But I realized clients would pay to keep the system running. That was power in a quiet form. Expertise. I didn't take it to hurt my old coworkers. I took it because the work mattered more than petty pride. Still, the thought that they might sue for IP was always in the back of my head. Devin met me in a noisy ramen shop. Steam fogged the neon sign outside. He said Allurex was hunting talent who actually built systems, not just talked about them. I showed him highlights, commit logs, private notes, my hidden signature. He smiled like someone seeing a rare map to treasure. "We can move fast," he said. I felt a strange mix of grief and exhilaration. This wasn't just a job offer. It felt like reclaiming dignity. But Devin also warned me, companies fought hard over IP. Hargrove might claim ownership and drag it into court. I nodded. We drafted a plan. Allurex would hire me, but we would also prepare legal proof of my independent work and offer a consulting option to Hargrove. Part of me wanted them to admit they'd been wrong. Part wanted to close the chapter quietly. Devin suggested a secure repository, timestamps frozen, non-disclosure contracts for engineers who might follow me. Sasha texted that night, "Do it. Don't let them take your work." Her faith warmed me. I slept for the first time in days with my phone on the nightstand, notifications mute, knowing we had a path. Rumors swirled at Hargrove like a bad wind. People asked where I had gone. Board members exchanged sharp emails. I watched from a distance as Mason tried to patch the system with thin knowledge and thicker confidence. It failed in small, embarrassing ways. A file that refused to load, an API that returned wrong timestamps. The client lost patience. Hargrove's PR issued cautious statements about improvements and restructuring, while they tried to contain the damage. I felt a weird tug, part sorrow for colleagues who would suffer from the chaos, part cold satisfaction. I started receiving offers from other companies, too. Allurex's offer came with equity and a chance to head a new systems team. It was tempting, but I wanted everything lined up. I asked Devin to hire Sasha and 2 other engineers who'd messaged me privately. "Where are you going?" I didn't want to leave good people behind to fix a mess that wasn't theirs to create. The ethics of leaving was heavier than the blow that started this. I felt like a captain deciding which crew to save from a sinking ship. Then Hargrove made a bold move. They sent a formal letter saying my work belonged to them because I had been an employee. The letter thrummed with corporate legalese and polite accusations. They demanded I return any files and stop consulting with their clients. My hands tightened around the paper. Devin's legal team read it and smiled thinly. They had expected it. Allurex's lawyers responded with detailed evidence showing timestamps, personal IP addresses, and backup logs proving I did the work from home. They also included emails from Jordan that proved I sometimes worked unpaid nights because the company encouraged us to own fixes. It was messy proof that actually worked in my favor. Hargrove's pressure pivoted into a court threat. The moment felt like an old movie where the villain slams the door and the hero lights a match. I did not want a headline war, but I also would not let them erase my decades of work. Meanwhile, Mason blew something else up. This time, an accidental deletion caused a security gap. Sensitive vendor data became visible in an admin panel. Panic spread. I watched the industry feeds and saw a headline, "Hargrove data breach linked to code changes." The story painted a portrait of incompetence at the top. Vendors threatened legal action. Clients paused payments. The board scrambled to find anyone who could fix the hole fast. And that's when I got the call I'd half expected. "We need your help," the head lawyer said. She sounded embarrassed. I listened and then said, "I can consult, but we need clear terms." They were desperate enough to agree. I set rules, credit where due, fees, and a clause to protect Allurex's involvement. The irony tasted like old coffee, bitter but energizing. I still felt for friends who suffered collateral damage. But I also knew letting them collapse without trying to help would be hollow. Consulting was complicated. I logged into the system remotely, I scanning code like a doctor checking a patient's charts. The breach came from a deleted validation script that allowed file paths to expose vendor metadata. It was small, stupid, easy to miss. Mason's edits had come from clueless bravado, not malice. I patched the hole carefully and rolled out temporary fixes while asking for a team to implement permanent changes. The clients breathed easier. Mornings were full of calls where I explained things plainly, and slowly people stopped blaming only one person. It was exhausting to be useful for a company that had turned its back on me, but part of me loved the work even in this chaos. Later, Jordan sent a message. Thanks. It was short and strange. He didn't say sorry. I didn't expect grand apologies. The system stabilized. But stabilization didn't erase the initial humiliation or the long nights I'd spent worrying about my reputation. AllureX announced me as Director of Systems. The press release was short and accurate. I felt a strange dissonance when I read it, pride touched with a curious sadness. I now had a team, resources, and a clean slate. PulseFlow, the product name we chose for the rebranded routing engine, started to stir interest before its first demo. I led design sessions, mentoring sessions, onboarding engineers who had been burned by bad leadership. Their gratitude warmed me, but I also kept one foot in the messy world of Hargrove. Legal filings were still circulating. They pushed out an aggressive cease and desist claiming PulseFlow copied proprietary methods. Devin laughed it off in private, but the PR team prepared statements. I kept working anyway. I had plans to improve the engine into something more than a fix, an ethical routing system that prioritized fair shipments, reduced waste, and ensured vendors had transparent billing. That kept me awake for nights in a good way. Then came a public blog post that changed everything. An old essay I'd written about fairness in tech found new life when someone on LinkedIn shared it. The post went viral in niche circles of logistics and engineering. People finally read the words I'd used to argue for valuing experience. Comments came in, ex-colleagues saying she was the engine, industry leaders noting the injustice, and strangers thanking me for speaking up. For the first time, the narrative shifted. Hargrove looked small for firing talent for appearances. Headlines started to ask questions. Did Hargrove throw away its best asset? Clients who'd been outraged by earlier service drops now wanted allusions to the original engineer behind stability. The industry smelled a scandal and leaned closer. That sag of relief I had felt months ago became a swell of momentum. With momentum came offers and partnership talks. AllureX set up demos where I showcased PulseFlow's advantages, emphasizing ethical practices and transparent data. 3 of Hargrove's largest clients attended a demo under non-disclosure and with cautious faces. They saw clean interfaces and live routing that reduced idle time and cut costs. After the demo, 2 clients asked AllureX to pilot the system. My heart thumped so loud when I read the confirmations that I had to sit down. This was not just personal justice. It was a measure of the work's value. Hargrove's leadership tried to spin it as market interest in any competitor, but the quiet truth was they had lost their edge because they ignored deep expertise. My team at AllureX started to hum with excitement. Engineers who once felt invisible now had a platform. It was proof that building with care mattered. Not everyone celebrated my success. Brett West, the CEO's son, lashed out publicly in a thinly veiled LinkedIn op-ed about innovation versus tradition. He scolded old ways without naming names, but everyone knew. The article read like a teenager lecturing elders, full of buzzwords and thin bravado. Critics pounced. Industry commentators called it tone-deaf. Brad's father, the CEO, posted a statement praising new energy and youthful leadership. But the board was quietly uncomfortable. The company's stock dipped as clients pulled back. Rumors ran wild in the industry about internal investigations and resignations. Brett tried to rally employees with pep talks, but morale was low. I watched headlines turn from curiosity to scorn. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing shallow bravado lose its shine. Still, I didn't gloat. Instead, I focused on the next product milestone and on supporting the people who followed me to AllureX. The legal battle reached a peak. Hargrove filed for injunctions. Lurex countered with production logs and sworn statements from engineers who confirmed I'd done the work at home and on personal time. The court paper trail was messy and intense. I gave depositions and answered questions that felt invasive. Lawyers on both sides read emails that revealed the company culture, requests for after-hours fixes, casual comments about hiring cheaper. It was ugly but truthful. The judge later issued a temporary restraining order preventing Hargrove from claiming PulseFlow as theirs. The press hailed it as a win for creators. I hadn't wanted to litigate, but the ruling felt like validation, not revenge, but recognition. Board members at Hargrove started whispering about leadership changes. I drank tea and went to work the next day, trying to keep my head clear. Hargrove's leadership fallout was faster than anyone expected. The board removed Brett from his advisory role and demanded a full audit. Jordan, saddled with guilt, requested a leave of absence. The founder, Carla, tried to steady the ship with a firm, public apology that read like a carefully edited script. In private, insiders told me she was furious with herself for letting nepotism cloud judgment. Memos leaked about performance reviews that were biased toward appearances rather than contributions. I felt complicated emotions. Relief, certainly, but also sadness for a company that had started with good intentions and lost its way. I thought about the engineers who stayed behind, trying to fix what the leadership had broken. They would need chances to rebuild trust. That idea pushed me to propose the Phoenix program at Lurex, a mentorship fund for mid-career professionals displaced by bias. The board loved the idea. The Phoenix program was small at first, scholarships for training, paid internships, and mentorships. We hired Marisol, who had been passed over at Hargrove despite decades of experience. Her first week was slow but steady. She watched our processes and then suggested a container tracking optimization that cut overhead. It was brilliant and practical. Watching her present to clients with confidence made my chest warm. The program started getting attention for helping people reclaim careers. Media coverage pointed to Lurex as a company that repaired industry wrongs. That felt powerful. At the same time, Hargrove was publicly trying to rebuild, but many clients had already signed pilot agreements with Lurex. The landscape shifted. It felt like the industry itself was waking up to the cost of ignoring employees who actually knew how things worked. One morning I received an email that felt like a full circle. Emma, an old colleague who had left Hargrove earlier, wrote that she'd read my TEDx talk online and wanted to apply for a role. She said my story had changed her mind about looking for work. We scheduled an interview. She was brilliant, quiet, and focused, exactly what the team needed. After she joined, she built a predictive model that helped us anticipate weather-related delays days in advance, saving clients money and headaches. Seeing former Hargrove talents flourish at Lurex was satisfying in a way that had nothing to do with payback. It was about making a better place to work. Clients noticed. The industry labeled Lurex a place where long-term careers could thrive again. I felt proud and humbled at the same time. The months blurred into fast work and small victories. PulseFlow 2.0 launched with a feature set that my old self would have dreamed of: transparent vendor fees, optimized fuel routes, and predictive delay alerts. Clients reported efficiency gains that translated directly into revenue. The press called it a breakthrough in logistics tech. With success came celebrity of a sort, podcast invites, interviews, and invites to speak. I accepted a TEDx invitation to tell the story I'd always tried to tell: experience matters. On stage I spoke plainly about being undervalued and finding strength in steady work. The talk resonated in ways I didn't expect. Messages poured in from people who'd been sidelined in their jobs, from young engineers who needed role models, from managers who wanted to build better cultures. The reach of that talk made me realize the ripple effect of telling one honest story. Not everyone changed. Brett tried to relaunch a new PR campaign praising restructuring and lean teams. The internet was ruthless. Critics compared his bluster to a boy-playing CEO. Hargrove stock wobbled. The board quietly ousted several leaders associated with the bad hires. Jordan attempted to come back with contrition, but the culture had shifted. Clients who had moved to Lurex were reluctant to go back. It felt final in a way I didn't relish. I was not vindictive. I simply wanted fairness and better workplaces. The industry gradually adopted stronger IP protections and clearer documentation practices. Companies started asking engineers how they documented work. That small change in contracts and culture seemed worth the fight. We celebrated Pulse Flow's millionth shipment. The office hosted a rooftop party where engineers and clients toasted with cold drinks under string lights. I looked across the crowd and saw people who'd been ignored before now smiling and healthy. Sasha bumped into me with a grin. Marisol held a small award we'd given her, and Emma was introducing her own feature to clients. I felt a deep peace I hadn't expected. Yet as the night wound down, I found a quiet corner and thought about the early days, coding into the night, the humiliation in the conference room, the numb curb. The memory still stung, but its edge had dulled. I had turned pain into purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then a surprising text arrived, an apology that came from an unexpected place. It was from Brett's father, the CEO, who wrote, "I misjudged the team. I see now that we lost focus. I am sorry." The message felt thin, but part of me recognized it as the start of honesty. I replied simply, "Thank you. I hope the company learns." He wrote back about steps they were taking: audits, new review boards, and a pledge to value deep work. Whether those promises would last, I didn't know. But the conversation felt like one small step. Later, the CEO publicly endorsed new ethics guidelines across the industry, perhaps pushed by the board. That was unexpected and, for once, welcome. Months later, Hargrove's founder called me to ask about joining a panel on fair hiring. I almost laughed at the irony. The panel was public and well attended. I agreed to speak because I wanted to set a tone, how to build durable systems, how to give mid-career professionals a place to grow. On stage, I spoke frankly. The founder listened with gravity. Afterward, she approached me and confessed privately that she had lost her way trying to chase trends. She wanted advice on rebuilding teams that respected deep knowledge. I offered it. Her gratitude felt earnest. It was not a rescue. It was a real chance for reconciliation. For the first time since that conference room, the possibility of something good arising from the fallout felt real. Allurex grew steadily. Pulse Flow became an industry standard for certain clients who value transparency. The Phoenix program expanded into partnerships with tech schools, giving scholarships to people who had been shoved aside. I mentored a dozen engineers personally. Each story I heard, people who had been replaced, dismissed, or ignored, made my work feel more important. It was not about payback. It was about changing a system that rewarded surface over substance. I still felt residual sadness for those who refused to change, but I focused on what we could build. One night I sat with a stack of thank you letters from scholarship recipients. Their words about how a chance had changed their lives cut through any bitterness I might have carried. That was my reward. Now as I write this, I sit by a window looking out at a city that keeps moving. Trucks rolling, lights blinking, people hurrying. My life is quieter and richer. I still check code sometimes at night, but now it's because I want to, not because I have to prove myself. The memory of Bradley's smirk is a lesson I carry, not a wound I nurse. Pulse Flow hums along, helping companies cut waste and treat partners fairly. The Phoenix program has helped dozens, and Allurex stands for steady work and fair treatment. If someone asked me if the firing was worth it, I would say no. No one should be humiliated to find their path. But if they asked whether anything good came from it, I would say yes. Out of a small, brutal moment, I discovered strength, found a family in my team, and helped change a tiny piece of industry culture. Best day ever. Maybe not one day, but the slow collection of better days, built on honor and hard work, that is my answer. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell to get notified the moment we drop a new story, and don't forget to like the video to help others find it.